The transport ship looked small and weak as it moved toward the massive Galactic Council station. Its hull was plain gray metal with no fancy decorations or threatening weapons visible on the outside. Inside the ship, Ambassador Marcus Kane sat quietly in his chair, wearing a simple black suit that looked like something any office worker might wear. His gray hair was neat and his hands were folded in his lap. He looked like a grandfather who worked at a bank, not someone who could be dangerous. The ship docked at the station with a soft bump. Kane stood up slowly as if his back hurt from sitting too long. He picked up a small briefcase and walked toward the airlock. Behind him, 3 other humans followed. They wore similar dark suits, but something about them felt different. Their eyes moved constantly, watching everything around them. They walked like cats ready to jump. But Kane looked relaxed and friendly. The airlock opened with a hiss of air. Kane stepped onto the station and was met by a tall blue alien with 4 arms. This was Council Representative Zexai of the Zephyrian Empire. The alien looked down at Kane with obvious disgust. "So you are the human diplomat," Zexai said in a voice like cold wind. "You look even weaker than we expected." Kane smiled politely. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I know humanity is still new to galactic politics. We appreciate any chance to learn and make friends." Zexai made a sound like laughter, but meaner. "Friends? Yes, we shall see about that." As they walked through the station corridors, Kane looked around with wonder, like a tourist seeing amazing sights for the first time. The station was huge, with curved walls covered in alien art and strange lights that changed colors. Hundreds of different alien species walked, crawled, or floated through the halls. Some had too many eyes, others had no eyes at all. Some breathed air, others wore special suits filled with different gases. "Amazing," Kane said softly. "So many different kinds of life, all working together in peace." One of his escorts, a woman with short dark hair, made a small sound in her throat. Kane glanced at her and she immediately looked away, but not before Kane saw something that looked almost like fear in her eyes. It was strange. Why would his own people be afraid of him? They entered a large meeting room where 3 more aliens waited. The first was Corvin General Thakmor, who looked like a giant insect covered in black armor. His people were known across the galaxy as fierce warriors. The second was Nexari Trade Prince Veltar, whose snake-like body was covered in expensive jewels. The Nexari were famous for being very smart and very greedy. The third was Council Chairman Quindex, whose people had been running galactic politics for thousands of years. Kane bowed politely to each of them. "Honored council members, I am Marcus Kane, speaking for all of humanity. We come in peace, hoping to trade and learn from your great civilizations." General Thakmor clicked his mandibles together, which was how his people laughed. "Trade? What could a species that just learned to fly between stars possibly offer us?" "We have some interesting minerals from our home system," Kane said humbly. "And perhaps our perspectives might be valuable. Sometimes a fresh view can help solve old problems." Trade Prince Veltar's forked tongue flicked out to taste the air. "Your species fascinates me, human. In all our studies, we have never seen people so soft. Your military records show you have fought wars, but they seem so small and pointless. Like children playing with toys," Kane nodded seriously. "You're absolutely right. We've made many mistakes in our history. That's why we hope to learn from wiser species like yourselves." Chairman Quindex leaned forward. His people were tall and thin, with pale skin that seemed to glow slightly. "Tell me, Ambassador Kane, what would humanity do if another species decided to take your worlds by force?" The question seemed to hang in the air. Kane was quiet for a moment, then smiled sadly. "I suppose we would try to talk first. Violence should always be the last choice, don't you think? There's usually a way to solve problems without anyone getting hurt." The aliens exchanged looks. Their expressions clearly said they thought Kane was either lying or stupid. General Thakmor's armor made scratching sounds as he moved, and if talking failed, the general pressed. Kane sighed. "Then I suppose we would have to defend ourselves as best we could. But we're not warriors like your people, General. We would probably lose." Behind Kane, one of his escorts shifted slightly. The movement was so small most people wouldn't notice it. But for just a second, the escort's hand moved toward his jacket in a way that suggested there was a weapon hidden there. Then he stopped and put his hand back at his side. But Chairman Quindex had very good eyes, and he saw the movement. Something cold touched the chairman's heart. "Your escorts seem nervous, Ambassador," Quindex said carefully. Kane turned to look at his people. "Oh, don't mind them. This is their first time away from Earth. Everything here is so new and exciting. They're just trying to be very careful not to offend anyone. But as Kane spoke, Quindex noticed something strange. The three escorts weren't looking around in wonder like tourists. Their eyes were mapping the room, counting exits, measuring distances. They stood in positions that would let them see all the doors and cover Kane from different angles. These were not nervous tourists. These were predators in a hunting formation. Perhaps, said Trade Prince Veltar, we should discuss what humanity can offer in more detail. Your species must have something special, or you would not have been invited to address the council. Kane opened his briefcase and pulled out a simple data pad. Well, we do have some unique cultural artifacts, music, art, literature, and our scientists have developed some interesting ideas about faster-than-light travel that might be worth studying. He began showing them images on the data pad, pictures of human cities, human art, human achievements. Everything looked peaceful and beautiful. No weapons, no armies, no signs of military power, just a quiet species that grew flowers and wrote poetry. But General Thakmor had fought in many wars and he knew how to read faces. As he watched Kane talk about human culture, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Kane's eyes never stopped moving. Even while speaking about art and music, Kane was studying the room, the aliens, their positions, their weaknesses. The general had seen that look before in the eyes of enemy commanders right before they attacked. The meeting continued for 2 hours. Kane answered every question politely and humbly. He seemed genuinely interested in learning about alien cultures. He asked thoughtful questions about their histories and traditions. He appeared to be exactly what he claimed, a peaceful diplomat from a harmless species. But small things kept happening that didn't quite fit. The way Kane's voice never changed, even when the aliens insulted humanity. The way his escorts moved in perfect coordination without seeming to communicate. The way Kane always knew exactly where everyone was in the room, even when he wasn't looking at them. As the meeting ended, Kane stood and bowed again. Thank you for your time, honored council members. I hope we can continue these discussions tomorrow. Perhaps we can find ways for our species to help each other. The aliens watched as Kane and his escorts left the room. When the humans were gone, the council members looked at each other with confusion and growing concern. Something is wrong with this picture, General Thakmor said finally. That human is not what he appears to be. But none of them could quite put their finger on what bothered them so much about the polite man in the black suit. The next morning, Kane returned to the council chambers exactly on time. He wore the same simple black suit and carried the same briefcase. He smiled and nodded politely to everyone he passed in the hallway. Several aliens whispered to each other as he walked by, but Kane seemed not to notice. The council members were already waiting when he arrived. They had spent the night discussing the strange human diplomat. None of them could shake the feeling that something was very wrong, but they couldn't prove anything. Kane had been perfectly polite and peaceful during their first meeting. Good morning, honored council members, Kane said as he took his seat. I've prepared a presentation about human trade goods and cultural exchanges. I think you'll find it interesting. Chairman Quindex nodded slowly. Before we begin, Ambassador, we have some concerns we'd like to discuss. Kane tilted his head like a curious child. Of course. How can I help? Our intelligence reports suggest that humanity may not be as peaceful as you claim, General Thakmor said bluntly. We have records of wars on your planet that lasted for years and killed millions. Kane's face showed genuine sadness. You're absolutely right, General. Our species has a terrible history of violence. That's exactly why we want to join the galactic community. We hope that being around more advanced civilizations will help us become better people. Trade Prince Veltar's tongue flicked out nervously. Yet your escorts yesterday moved like trained soldiers. Many humans learn basic self-defense, Kane replied gently. Our world can be dangerous. But these men have never hurt anyone who didn't attack first. They're here to learn, just like me. The aliens exchanged glances. Kane's answers were reasonable, but something still felt wrong. They had spent centuries dealing with new species, and usually they could read them easily. But Kane was like looking at a book written in a language they didn't understand. Chairman Quindex made a decision. Very well. Please begin your presentation. Kane stood up and activated a holographic projector. Images of human art and music filled the air above the table. He spoke about trade possibilities and cultural exchange programs. His voice was calm and friendly. Everything seemed normal. But 20 minutes into the presentation, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing the room in red light. Alarms began blaring throughout the station. Kane looked around with apparent confusion and concern. "What's happening?" he asked. Before anyone could answer, the chamber doors exploded inward. Smoke filled the room as armed figures poured through the opening. They wore black armor and carried advanced energy weapons. Their faces were hidden behind combat masks. "Nobody move," one of the attackers shouted. "This is a liberation operation." General Thakmore reached for his sidearm but stopped when 3 weapons pointed at his head. The attackers moved with military precision, taking control of the room in seconds. Kane stood frozen in place, his face showing terror. "Please," Kane said, his voice shaking. "Don't hurt anyone. We can talk about whatever you want." One of the attackers, who seemed to be their leader, laughed coldly. "The famous human diplomat. You're going to be the first casualty in the war between your species and the Council." "War?" Kane looked genuinely confused. "But we came here for peace. We don't want war with anyone." The leader raised his weapon toward Kane's chest. "Your people are lying parasites who want to steal our resources. Today we show the galaxy what humans really are." What happened next took less than 3 seconds, but to the watching aliens, it seemed to last forever. Kane's entire body language changed in an instant. The confused, frightened diplomat vanished. His shoulders straightened, his eyes went cold, and his hands moved with impossible speed. He stepped sideways as the attacker fired, the energy blast missing him by inches. His right hand grabbed the attacker's wrist and twisted. There was a sharp crack and the weapon clattered to the floor. Kane's other hand struck the attacker's throat with surgical precision. The masked figure dropped like a stone, making horrible choking sounds. The other attacker spun toward Kane, but he was already moving. He rolled across the table, scattering holographic projectors and data pads. Another energy blast scorched the air where he had been standing. Kane came up behind General Thakmore's chair and grabbed a metal stylus from the table. One of the attackers had a clear shot at Kane and pulled the trigger. But Kane had already anticipated the move. He threw the stylus with deadly accuracy. It struck the attacker's weapon just as it fired, deflecting the beam into the ceiling. Before the attacker could recover, Kane was on him. The fight was brutal and one-sided. Kane moved like water, flowing around attacks that should have killed him. His hands struck vital points with medical precision. He used everything as a weapon. Pieces of furniture, broken equipment, even the attacker's own gear against them. One attacker swung a combat knife at Kane's head. Kane caught the man's wrist, twisted, and the knife changed hands so fast the aliens couldn't follow the movement. A heartbeat later, the attacker was on the ground with his own blade at his throat. "Yield," Kane said quietly. The remaining attackers hesitated. Their leader was unconscious. 3 of their team were down, and the harmless diplomat had somehow become a killing machine. They had trained for years, used the best equipment, planned every detail. But none of it mattered against someone who fought like Kane. The last 2 attackers looked at each other, then dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Kane straightened up slowly. His black suit was torn and dirty, but he wasn't even breathing hard. He looked down at the unconscious leader, then at the aliens who were staring at him in shock. "I apologize for the violence," Kane said politely, as if he had spilled coffee on someone's desk. "But they didn't give me much choice." Chairman Quindex found his voice first. "Who? What are you?" Kane adjusted his tie with steady hands. "I'm exactly who I said I was, Chairman. Marcus Kane, human diplomat, here to discuss peaceful trade relations." "But the way you fought," General Thakmore whispered. "No diplomat moves like that." Kane smiled sadly. "Every human learns to defend themselves, General. I told you yesterday that our world can be dangerous. I learned these skills a long time ago during some difficult years in human history." Trade Prince Veltar's voice shook. "You killed them so easily." "I didn't kill anyone," Kane corrected gently. "They're all unconscious or disabled. They'll recover completely with proper medical care. I could have killed them, but I chose not to. That's what civilized people do. They use only the force necessary to stop a threat." The chamber doors burst open again as station security forces poured in. They stopped in amazement at the scene. Attackers scattered unconscious around the room. The human diplomat standing calmly in the middle with his hands clasped behind his back. Kane turned to the security chief. "Officer, These individuals attempted to harm council members and myself. I was forced to defend us all. I hope they can be treated for their injuries and questioned about who sent them. The security chief looked around the room, trying to process what he was seeing. Sir, did you do all this? Kane nodded modestly. I had some help from luck and the element of surprise. Are the council members injured? That's the most important thing. As medical teams tended to the unconscious attackers, the aliens stared at Kane with new eyes. The gentle, humble diplomat was still there, still polite and concerned for everyone's welfare. But now they could see what had been hidden underneath all along. This wasn't a harmless human who had gotten lucky in a fight. This was a predator who had been pretending to be prey. And if the council had made one terrible mistake in judging Kane, what other mistakes had they made about humanity? The medical teams finished loading the unconscious attackers onto stretchers. Kane stood quietly to one side, still looking like a mild-mannered diplomat despite his torn suit. But the aliens couldn't stop staring at him. The fight had lasted less than a minute, yet it had changed everything. Perhaps we should continue our meeting in a more secure location, Chairman Quindex suggested. His voice carefully controlled. Kane nodded. That sounds wise. I'm sorry this happened during what was supposed to be a peaceful discussion. They moved to a smaller conference room deeper inside the station. This one had thick walls and heavy security doors. Kane's 3 escorts were waiting there, and the aliens noticed something new about them. They weren't trying to hide what they were anymore. The pretense was gone. These men moved like soldiers, watched like guards, and positioned themselves like a security detail protecting someone very important. Kane took his seat and folded his hands on the table. Before we continue, I think we need to address what just happened. Yes, General Thakmore said slowly. We do. Kane was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Those attackers weren't random terrorists, were they? The question hung in the air like smoke. The aliens exchanged uncomfortable glances. What makes you think that? Trade Prince Veltar asked. Kane's smile was sad but knowing. Their equipment was military grade, not something terrorists could afford. They knew the station's layout perfectly, including which room we'd be meeting in. They had inside information about security protocols, and most telling of all, they specifically mentioned starting a war between humanity and the Council. Chairman Quindex felt ice in his stomach. Are you suggesting the Council arranged this attack? I'm not suggesting anything, Kane replied gently. I'm stating facts and letting you draw your own conclusions. General Thakmore's mandibles clicked nervously. Even if such an operation existed, how could you possibly know these details? Kane opened his briefcase and pulled out a small device. He set it on the table and pressed a button. A holographic display appeared, showing surveillance footage from the station's corridors. The footage clearly showed the attackers being guided to their position by a Nexari official. We've been monitoring communications since we arrived, Kane said simply. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure for what? Chairman Quindex demanded. Kane looked directly at him. For a diplomatic mission to potentially hostile territory. The words landed like physical blows. Trade Prince Veltar's jeweled scales rattled as he shifted nervously. You came here expecting treachery? Kane shook his head. I came here hoping for friendship. But hoping and preparing are different things. My species learned long ago that peace is best maintained by being ready for war. He pressed another button on his device. New images appeared. Detailed scans of the station's defenses. Complete records of all Council military assets in the system. Profiles of every alien species' strengths and weaknesses. We know about your plan to invade human space. Kane continued in that same gentle voice. We know about the resource surveys your ships have been conducting in our territory. We know about the military buildup disguised as trade expeditions. General Thakmore felt his breathing become difficult. Impossible. Our operations were classified at the highest levels. Kane's eyes grew cold. General, my species has been watching the galaxy for longer than you realize. Did you think we would venture into space without studying our potential neighbors first? He pressed the device again. This time the hologram showed something that made all the aliens recoil in shock. It was a detailed map of their home worlds, complete with military installations, population centers, and strategic weaknesses, you see? Kane said conversationally. While you were planning to conquer a primitive species, that primitive species was learning everything about you. Chairman Quindex found his voice. Who are you? Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight it hadn't held before. My name is Marcus Kane. I am humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council. I am also the former Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces, veteran of the Solar Wars, architect of the Titan campaign, and the man who planned humanity's expansion into deep space. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. General Thakmore, who had commanded armies across dozens of worlds, felt genuine fear for the first time in decades. The Solar Wars were supposed to be minor conflicts, he whispered. Kane nodded. They were. We fought them with one hand tied behind our back, using outdated equipment and limited numbers. Even so, we won every engagement. What does that tell you about what we could do with modern resources and full commitment? Trade Prince Veltar's forked tongue flicked out rapidly, tasting fear in the air. Your records show small populations, limited fleets. Our public records, Kane corrected. Would you show your true military strength to potential enemies? He activated his device one more time. The holographic display now showed something that made the aliens' blood freeze. Hundreds of ships appearing out of nowhere around their home worlds. Not attacking, just there, visible, waiting. Those are just the ships we're letting you see, Kane said quietly. The ones we want you to know about. The implications hit the council members like a physical force. If those were just the visible ships, this is impossible, Chairman Quindex breathed. Our sensors would have detected. Your sensors detect what we allow them to detect, Kane interrupted. Did you think a species that survived and thrived in the Sol system would be ignorant of stealth technology? He leaned forward slightly, and for the first time, the alien saw the real Marcus Kane. Not the polite diplomat, not the confused victim, but the man who had conquered worlds and shaped the destiny of an entire species. Let me be very clear, Kane said, his voice carrying absolute authority. Humanity came to this meeting seeking peace and trade. We still want those things, but we came prepared for war because that's what intelligent predators do. Predators? General Thakmore repeated. Kane smiled, and there was something terrible in that smile. General, what did you think would happen when a species that clawed its way to the top of a death world's food chain decided to explore the galaxy? Did you imagine we'd somehow become harmless? He stood up slowly, and the aliens instinctively leaned back. You see me as I choose to appear, Kane continued, a harmless diplomat in a suit. But that's just another tool. Like the weapons my escorts carry or the ships waiting in your systems. We are what we need to be when we need to be it. He straightened his torn jacket. The attack today was supposed to justify a war against humanity. Instead, it's shown you what one human can do when threatened. Imagine what our entire species could do if you gave us no choice. The silence stretched on for long minutes. Finally, Chairman Quindex spoke. What do you want? Kane sat back down and folded his hands. When he answered, he was the polite diplomat again. The same thing I wanted yesterday, Chairman. Fair trade agreements, cultural exchange, and peaceful coexistence. The only difference is that now you understand the consequences if you choose a different path. He looked around the table at each of them. Humanity offers its friendship freely, but we've learned that friendship must be backed by strength or it becomes weakness. We prefer to be friends, but we're very, very good at being enemies. Chairman Quindex stared at the holographic displays showing human ships positioned around their homeworlds. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his communication device. I need to verify these images, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Kane nodded politely. Of course. Take all the time you need. The chairman activated his device and began speaking rapidly in his native language to someone off-screen. The other council members waited in tense silence. After several minutes of increasingly urgent conversation, Quindex's face went pale. They're real, he whispered. Our home fleet confirms visual contact with unknown vessels. Ships unlike anything in our databases. General Thakmore activated his own communicator. Command, this is General Thakmore. Report status of home defense grid. The response came quickly, and the general's armored face showed shock. 17 unidentified vessels in high orbit around Corvin Prime. They appeared simultaneously 15 minutes ago. Our weapons are targeting them, but they're not responding to hails or threats. Trade Prince Veltar was already speaking to his own people. The conversation was brief, and when he disconnected, his snake-like body was coiled tight with tension. 32 ships around our 3 primary worlds, he reported. They're not attacking, but they're in perfect position to destroy our orbital trade stations. Kane watched their growing panic with calm eyes. As I said, those are just the ones we're letting you see. A demonstration to help you understand the situation. How many ships do you actually have? Chairman Quindex asked. Kane's smile was enigmatic. Enough. One of Kane's escorts stepped forward and handed him a different communication device. Kane activated it and spoke in clear, measured tones. This is Ambassador Kane. Execute Protocol 7. Within moments, the aliens' communicators began buzzing with reports from across the galaxy. More ships were appearing, dropping their stealth systems and becoming visible to sensors, not just around the Council members' homeworlds, but at strategic points throughout their territories. Status report, Kane said into his device. A crisp voice responded. Phase 1 complete, sir. All assets in position. Standing by for Phase 2 authorization. Kane looked around the table. Gentlemen, I'd like you to understand something important. Everything you're seeing right now was put in place over the past 6 months. While you were making your plans to invade human space, we were making our own preparations. General Thakmore's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in his species. 6 months? That's impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected such massive fleet movements. Would they? Kane asked mildly. He activated his briefcase device again and new images appeared. These are recordings from your own surveillance systems. Watch carefully. The hologram showed what appeared to be routine merchant convoys traveling through Galactic Council space. Ordinary cargo ships following normal trade routes carrying standard commercial goods. Nothing threatening or unusual. Now watch the same footage with enhanced scanning, Kane said. The image changed, revealing the truth. The cargo ships were actually advanced warships with sophisticated cloaking technology. The commercial goods were weapons and military equipment. The merchant crews moved and acted like trained soldiers. Every trade convoy, every exploration vessel, every scientific expedition humanity has sent into galaxy space for the past year has been a military operation in disguise, Kane explained. We've been studying you, mapping your defenses, positioning our assets, and preparing for exactly this situation. Trade Prince Veltar's jeweled scales were now rattling constantly. But your technology, our intelligence said humanity was decades behind galactic standard. Kane chuckled softly. Prince, has it occurred to you that we might have been showing you exactly what we wanted you to see? He pressed another control, and the holographic display showed technical specifications for human military equipment. The aliens stared in growing horror at weapon systems and defensive technologies far more advanced than anything in their own arsenals. You see, when a species spends thousands of years trying to kill each other with ever more creative methods, they tend to get very good at warfare. Kane said conversationally. We've had wars fought with sticks and stones, swords and shields, gunpowder and bullets, nuclear weapons and orbital bombardment. Each time we survived and learned. Chairman Quindex was frantically working his communicator, trying to coordinate with other council worlds. The reports coming back painted an increasingly dire picture. Human ships were everywhere, appearing out of nowhere, positioned to strike at every major population center and military installation in council space. This is madness, the chairman said. Even if you could destroy our home worlds, the rest of the galaxy would unite against you. You'd face the combined might of dozens of species. Kane's expression grew serious. Chairman, do you really think we didn't plan for that possibility? He spoke into his communicator again. Intelligence Division, provide update on galactic situation. The response came immediately. Sir, all major galactic powers report similar vessel appearances in their territory. The Hegemony, the Trade Federation, the warrior clans, all are currently facing human fleet elements positioned at strategic points throughout their space. Kane looked back at the stunned aliens. We didn't just prepare for war with the Council. We prepared for war with everyone. General Thakmore found his voice. You're threatening the entire galaxy? We're demonstrating our capabilities, Kane corrected. There's a difference. Threats are what weak species make when they can't back up their words. We prefer to show rather than tell. He activated his device one more time. The hologram now displayed a real-time strategic map of the entire galaxy, with human forces marked in blue. The aliens stared in disbelief at the scope of the deployment. Human ships were positioned at every major choke point, every critical trade route, every strategic system. How is this possible? Chairman Quindex whispered. Kane's expression softened slightly. Chairman, Did you really think a species that conquered an entire solar system would be satisfied with just one world? We've been expanding into deep space for decades. The only difference is that we've been very quiet about it. Trade Prince Veltar's voice shook. You've been colonizing in secret? Not colonizing, Kane corrected. Establishing forward bases, hidden installations, supply depots. We've been building the infrastructure for exactly this kind of operation, because we knew that eventually someone would try to conquer us. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Humanity has never been an aggressive species, despite what you might think. We don't want to conquer the galaxy or rule over other species. We just want to be left alone to grow and explore in peace. He turned back to face them. But we learned long ago that if you want peace, you must be prepared for war. And if you're going to prepare for war, you might as well be very, very good at it. General Thakmore struggled to comprehend the implications. You've turned the entire galaxy into a potential battlefield. Kane nodded gravely. And we've positioned ourselves to win that battle if it becomes necessary. But here's the thing. We don't want to fight. We never wanted to fight. That's why I'm here, trying to work out peaceful agreements. He returned to his seat and looked directly at each council member. But you need to understand that peace is a choice we're offering, not a weakness you can exploit. We can be your partners and friends, sharing knowledge and resources for mutual benefit, or we can be the nightmare that destroys everything you've built. Kane's voice became very quiet, but somehow that made it more terrifying. The choice is yours, but choose carefully, because you won't get another chance. The silence in the conference room stretched for what felt like hours. The council members stared at their communication devices, receiving constant updates about human ships appearing throughout the galaxy. Every report was the same. Massive, advanced vessels in perfect position to strike at critical targets but taking no hostile action. Just waiting. Chairman Quindex finally looked up from his communicator, his pale skin even more ghostly than usual. Ambassador Kane, he said carefully, if we were to accept your original proposal for peaceful trade relations, what would happen to these demonstrations? Kane smiled, and for the first time since the attack, it looked genuinely warm. They would end immediately. Our ships would return to their normal duties of exploration and defense. The galaxy would go back to its usual business. And if we refuse? General Thakmore asked, though he clearly dreaded the answer. Kane's smile faded. Then you would learn why humanity spent so much effort preparing for this possibility. But I really hope it doesn't come to that. Trade Prince Veltar shifted nervously, his jeweled scales catching the light. These trade agreements you mentioned. What exactly are you proposing? Kane opened his briefcase again and pulled out a data pad. Nothing unreasonable. Standard exchange of goods and resources, shared scientific research, cultural programs, mutual defense agreements against external threats. The same things I proposed yesterday before you tried to have me killed. He slid the data pad across the table. The terms are actually quite generous. We're offering advanced medical technology, new food sources, improved manufacturing processes. All we want in return is fair payment and the guarantee that humanity will be treated as equals in galactic society. Chairman Quindex picked up the data pad and began reading. His eyes widened as he scanned the details. These medical advances, they could save millions of lives across our worlds. Billions, actually, Kane corrected. We've solved problems that your people have struggled with for centuries. Cancer, genetic disorders, aging itself, all treatable with human medical science. General Thakmore leaned forward. Why would you share such valuable information? Kane shrugged. Because that's what friends do. They help each other. And because a galaxy full of healthy, prosperous people is better for trade than one full of sick and dying populations. The general's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. You could have demanded tribute, made us into vassals. We could have, Kane agreed. But what would be the point? Slaves and vassals make poor trading partners. We'd rather have allies and friends. Trade Prince Veltar studied the economic projections on the data pad. These profit estimates, if even half of this is accurate, the increased trade would make all our species wealthier than we've ever been. Kane nodded. Exactly. War is expensive and destructive. Peace is profitable for everyone involved. We'd rather spend our resources on exploration and research than on weapons and warfare. Chairman Quindex set down the data pad and looked directly at Kane. If we agree to these terms, how do we know humanity won't use this demonstrated military superiority to make additional demands later? The question hung in the air, and Kane was quiet for a long moment before answering. Because, he said finally, that's not who we are. Chairman, everything I've shown you today was designed to prevent a war, not start one. We revealed our capabilities to avoid having to use them. He gestured to his escorts, who still stood ready but relaxed. These men have killed in humanity's service, but they'd rather spend their time protecting diplomats than fighting soldiers. I've commanded fleets in battle, but I'd rather negotiate trade agreements than plan military campaigns. Kane stood up and walked to the window again, looking out at the stars. Humanity learned something important during our history of warfare. The strongest warrior is not the one who wins every fight. It's the one who never has to fight at all. He turned back to face the council. We prepared for war so thoroughly that no one would dare start one with us. We made ourselves so dangerous that others would choose peace instead of conflict. That's the real victory. General Thakmore made a decision. I will recommend to my people that we accept these terms. Trade. Prince Veltar nodded agreement. The economic benefits alone make this worthwhile, and the alternative is unacceptable. All eyes turned to Chairman Quindex. As the senior council member, his decision would carry the most weight. The chairman was quiet for a long time, studying Kane's face. Finally he spoke. You could have conquered us all, he said softly. Instead, you're offering us partnership. Kane smiled. Chairman, conquest is what weak species do when they can't achieve their goals through negotiation. Strong species create allies, not enemies. Quindex made his decision. I will recommend acceptance of your terms to the full council. But I have one question. Of course. Will humanity always be this prepared? Kane's smile became enigmatic. Chairman, we're a species that survived ice ages, plagues, nuclear wars, and the colonization of hostile worlds. We don't know how to be unprepared. The chairman activated his communicator. Council emergency session, immediate priority. All members report to primary chambers for vote on human alliance proposal. As the council members prepared to leave, Kane spoke once more. There's something else you should understand, he said quietly. What you've seen today, the ships, the technology, the strategic positioning, this is just what one human world can do. We have dozens of colonies now, each contributing to our capabilities. The aliens stopped in their tracks, you mean? General Thakmore began. Kane nodded. Today's demonstration was just Earth's contribution to humanity's defense. Our other worlds have been equally busy. Trade Prince Veltar's tongue flicked out nervously. How many humans are there? More than you thought, Kane replied simply. And all of them remember that the galaxy once tried to destroy their species. He packed up his briefcase and straightened his tie. But they also know that the galaxy chose peace instead. They'll remember that too. 2 hours later, the Galactic Council voted unanimously to accept humanity's trade proposals. The human ships throughout the galaxy vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, returning to whatever hidden bases they had emerged from. Kane stood in his transport ship as it prepared to depart the council station. Through the viewport, he could see alien ships already beginning to arrive with trade goods and diplomatic personnel. The galaxy was about to become a very different place. His escort leader approached. Sir, was it necessary to reveal so much of our capabilities? Kane considered the question. Captain, fear is a useful tool, but it's not a foundation for lasting peace. They needed to understand what they were dealing with, but they also needed to see that we chose restraint. The captain nodded. And if they had chosen differently? Kane's expression grew cold. Then they would have learned that everything we showed them today was just the beginning. As the transport jumped to hyperspace, Kane sat back in his chair and allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy had tried to destroy humanity before they understood what humans truly were. Now they knew. And now they would spend the rest of their existence very carefully making sure humanity remained their friend. Because in a galaxy full of predators, the most dangerous ones were those who looked harmless until the moment they chose not to be.